My best friend introduced me to the RealReal a few years ago, and honestly, I am obsessed and hooked. Not only have I bought some amazing additions to my own wardrobe, but I've also consigned some of the things I no longer wear or use. So as you can imagine, I was floored when Julie Wainwright landed in my inbox to be on my show. Julie's an entrepreneur and an e-commerce pioneer with over 20 years of experience building and growing technology and consumer businesses. She is the CEO and co-founder of Ahara, a precision nutrition company that was launched in 2022. And previously, Julie founded the RealReal, growing it into the leading luxury consignment company with over $1 billion in revenue, reshaping how people buy and sell high-end goods. She secured significant venture funding and took the company public in 2019. Her list of accolades is a long one, but most recently, she's added author to that list. Her book, Time to Get Real, How I Built a $1 Billion Business That Rocked the Fashion Industry, is out this week. So you can find the link to that in the show notes. But for now, I want you to come on in and meet Julie. This is an episode that is going to absolutely floor you. Welcome back to another episode of Dear FoundHer. I'm so excited about today's guest. As I told her just a few minutes ago, I nearly fell out of my chair when I was pitched her by her publicist because I am the ultimate consumer of her first company, The RealReal. I love what she has built. She revolutionized how people consume luxury goods. And I cannot believe that Julie Wainwright is here with us today to share her story, to share her knowledge, to share her wisdom, and how she's doing it all over again. So Julie, welcome.
Oh my gosh, what an intro. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm so excited for everyone to hear your story. So as we do it with every episode, please kick us off by sharing your story with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you built.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. So I was way back when, in the year 1999, I was the CEO of a company called Petstock. And it was at the beginning of the bubble. We went public. I had to shut it down because I knew we couldn't get our next level of financing. And it became the symbol for the dot-com explosion. And I became the person who basically was the symbol also as a CEO, even though there were over 1,000 companies shut down. And one of them in particular lost over $1 billion, but no one heard about Webvan anymore. They heard about pets.com, and we had that little puppet, which was very popular. After that, during that time, the day I was shutting the company down, this still gets to me. I don't like to go this far back because it's funny how emotions get stuck. My husband at the time asked me for a divorce. So literally the day I was shutting the company. So he just sort of wanted to run away. And so I found myself, there were, very busy time just to shut a company down and have it happen orderly. And then I started working with the VC for a couple of years. But I found myself at the age of 50, sort of in a bad situation because my ex-husband had been a social worker and did really great work with autistic adults. But he hadn't made a lot of money. So all the money now was divided by two. I was getting really bad job offers. And finally, one recruiter, who in my book I called Mr. Cupid, but his name was Love. Mr. Love told me I was really basically unhireable in the Valley. And then I had to make a decision. What was I going to do? I mean, I had about 2 years worth of savings and I had a house. So I did have a house. And so I decided I really needed to start my own company and that I had to do it. I loved entrepreneurs. All the jobs I had in tech were very entrepreneurial. And I was brought in as the CEO at an early stage, but that's different than assuming all the risk. And so I did a whole map I knew I wanted to get back into commerce, e-commerce specifically. I knew Amazon would be my main competitor, and I mapped out what they could do and couldn't do. And one of the areas they couldn't do was luxury, which I had it parked in my brain, but I thought, I'm never going to create a luxury company. It's just not going to happen. And then I was shopping with a girlfriend who beautiful boutique that was beautiful shoes. They had all the top brand shoes. In the back, she had an area she called the Vault, which was all luxury consignment. And that's where my friend shopped. Now, we had been shopping buddies for a long time. It's sort of funny. You know how you meet someone and like maybe you're a 6 on the top and the 4 on the bottom or vice versa, and they're the opposite. So literally we would buy suits and switch them.
Oh my
buy
God.
the same suit. Because you couldn't, instead of altering, it was like, no, I need that. Anyway. So we had been shopping together quite a bit, and she's a successful venture capitalist, and that's where she spent her money. And back with the previously owned goods. And we got out and I was shocked because I thought I knew her shopping patterns anyway. And I said, what happened? She goes, are you kidding me? I got Prada, I got Gucci, I got Louis Vuitton at a great deal. Who doesn't want a deal? And I said, well, aren't you worried about fake? She goes, no, I trust the owner. She knows where these goods came from. And I said, well, would you ever go into a consignment store? She said, never. They're too gross. Now we're in this beautiful boutique. But I said, but you bought consignment. She goes, I bought beautiful things at a good price. Now you see how the whole environment changed her point of view. And then I'm like, have you ever consigned? She goes, no, it's way too hard. And I knew it at that moment. That was the business. So that set me on a lot of research where I consigned across multiple platforms. I really wish we would have gotten you the book before, Lindsay, because one of the stories when I went in to sell my fine jewelry in an elevated space, it was so gross. Even, I can almost relive it. It was one of the things that was an elevated, supposedly pawn shop, whatever it was, but it was so creepy. And it was downtown San Francisco. And anyway, so at the end of my exploration, I knew I could build something that was phenomenal, leveraging the internet and technology. I had reached out to the owner of the boutique to join me because she was an ex-tech exec who was doing this to raise her child. And she said, oh, this will be a good thing for you to raise the child. And, my tech job was too demanding. By the time she got back to me, I had a name. I had friends and family financing, and I was like off to the races. And she wanted to talk about it. I'm like, I'm on it. I'm doing it. It's already happening. And I also knew that I wasn't going to be able to raise a lot of money because I had that big Pets.com puppet looming large on my back. And so I raised friends and family. And the first year we got to $10 million in sales, and the business couldn't be denied then. And that's when I went out to raise capital. Now there's a lot of stories in between of me chasing. No, wait, this is sort of funny. There was this, I don't even know if they're still around. There was a brand new thing called Angel List, where if you're in the tech world, if you posted it on there and a couple key influencers put money in you, then you would shoot up and get attention. It had all this gaming techniques in it, and they wouldn't let me in. The guys wouldn't let me in. They're like, nobody wants to invest. That's a dumb business. No one wants to invest in it. So then I had to go back to a contractor that had worked for me at another company where I was CEO, who now had a small VC firm, but he was like the man of the hour, and basically talk him through the business and almost beg him to give me $25K. And then if he said he was making an investment, they would let me in. So he did, but it took like me chasing him for 4 months to get his $25K, and he let me in. And then I raised $1.1 million off that platform. But it was just, it was never easy, but I knew it was going to work. There was never a moment of doubt.
What year was this that you started?
That was 2011 to 2012.
And you made it, and the RealReal revenue was $10 million that year.
Yes. You have to define a little weird because if you look at their balance sheet, they take off the consignment portion, but the top line revenue before you exit out the consigned dollars was 10 million.
How did you get people to trust you to consign and to buy? Because this is like...
Oh, the buying was easy.
Okay.
No, that was never a problem. The demand is always there. It's very aggressive. You know what we did? We went to people's homes right away. It was always like, we're going to go to your homes. We'll pick it up. We undercut a normal consignment store. So we gave them a little bit more. I started a program for stylists in LA, LA and New York, but mostly LA because we weren't in New York yet. So it was sort of city by city, winning city by city. And when we got down to LA, I had the stylist program where we'd give them an override if they tried us. And I thought this program's going to work. And then like nothing happened. And right when we were sort of scratching in the dirt going, oh, we're in trouble because everything sold out really quickly. And there were only myself and a woman named Ratzi Sahi Levesque, who's now the CEO. There were only two of us really as full-time employees. And then we got a call to clean out a celebrity's warehouse based on the work I had done about 3.5, 4 months before that. And that got us through the summer. And then other people started calling, but it was a city by city growth plan.
And I want to paint a picture for everyone right now because I can appreciate this because it's when I started my first business too. The world was a different place in 2011, 2012. Let's think about that for a minute. There wasn't even Instagram. Instagram wasn't even really a big thing until 2013. I mean, it was a little bit around, not like it is now, certainly, and not like it was in 2013, 2014. So when you launched your business, you really had to rely on this trust and word of mouth, right?
It was word of mouth. I mean, we did get we had a little local press. The first was winning in San Francisco, and then I bought, now this will sound crazy, especially now, although it probably still works. The post office was running this big promotion where if you do just a card, like a 5x7 card and bulk mail to zip codes, and I think the cards all printed up cost both sides, like, I can't believe I still remember this, like 50 cents a person. So that was my lead gen program, mailing cards to people's mailboxes. And then some neighborhoods had their little newspaper. The Beverly Hills Courier was one. And so we would add in those local free newspapers and see if it would pull. But it really was a direct mail campaign to generate awareness. And we were flooding we just, once you get, because you can measure it, right? So you can measure it. And so once we knew it worked, we were like, we have to hit them 3 times.
Totally.
And things sold quickly. So people got paid quickly. So the repeat rate on the consigners was really high if they had a lot. And the repeat rate on the buyers was high. So then we had this beast. We had to get more and more consigners. And, at that point, we weren't worried. And I don't even think the company is that worried about demand now either.
You had this first year, it was $10 million in revenue, and then you said you went out to raise money. Tell me a little bit about that process and how you were received. And do you feel that that was the way to do it because it made it easier?
Well, it was sort of the way I knew, and I had contacts, and it was a technology-backed business. So in that sense, it's sort of going to the pool I knew, even though I recognized it was going to be hard. Men didn't get it. All right. Tech men didn't get it. So I don't think, that's not really that big of a surprise. Some of them were kind of rude, actually very rude. One guy put his foot on the desk and said, "See this shoe?" And I'm like, yes. So I saw the shoe. I mean, what was that about? And then he said, "I've had that for 5 years. What do you think about that?" I'm like, "You're not my customer." I mean, it was just like it was this weird, like, I know more than you. And then there's a lot of people from eBay that are now venture capitalists. And they were like, eBay's fine. I'm like, well, it's not fine for luxury. But, you only need one good lead. And I walked into a firm called Canaan Partners. I knew a partner there and he had invested. I think Canaan had invested. In any case, Berkeley, I was the CEO of Berkeley Systems and also of a company called Real.com, which was the first one to sell movies online. So he knew me from that. And Eric said, "Well, I want you to meet my partner, Maha Ibram." And she's a woman. And I walked in, she's like, "This is amazing. Let me send over your numbers. Let's talk. Can you come in next Monday?" Which is when they have their big partners meeting. So we walked in, presented. Again, it was just Ratzi and I. I think maybe I had a part-time CTO then, and I'm pretty sure I did. We walked in, showed him the numbers, talked about the business. Her partner that I knew was a great guy, Eric. Eric's like, "Well, nobody's going to let someone go to their house. I mean, it's just not going to happen. People just don't go to people's homes." I said, "Eric, we were at your house last week." And he's like, "Oh, okay." Because what we had done is we wanted to get them engaged in the process. So we had asked people. So he didn't know. We didn't ask him.
Oh my God, that is so funny.
Isn't that funny?
That is so funny. And so they were your first investor?
They were our first. And then once you get a lead, and then more importantly, they were a lead. So when you're out raising venture capital, they're like, "Oh, it's great if you get a lead, come back," because they don't ever want to say no. They always say a fake no. So that would be considered a fake no, right? Because they
Yes.
really don't, if they wanted to invest that much, they would be the lead. But if you do get a lead, then they're like, oh, somebody saw something, then I want to be in it. So once I got Maha in, then Matthias Schilling from eVentures now came in. He's a European who understood what we were doing, not a normal tech guy. And then Dana Settle came in from Greycroft. She got it. She had a fight with her partners who kept saying, this doesn't make sense. So basically I had 2 strong women and a European man as my first investors, and they were awesome. They really understood the business.
And how did that first injection of investment change the face of the business? What did you do?
Yes.
What was like the first step?
Well, at that time, so if you think about it, you started a business. So, I was doing customer service. I was shipping product. We had to hire an outside gemologist to evaluate the goods, but we were inspecting the goods and looking to see if they were fake. We were checking the price. It was just everything. So now we could hire someone to pick, pack, and ship. All right. That was like, wow, this is
And
big.
that probably was huge for you and made the biggest difference.
And then we could hire someone. That person also could do part-time emails and answer customer queries. And so just having that breathing room, and because of the program with the stylist in LA, our business was picking up. I could hire a full-time person in LA. And when Rati joined me, so she had her own brick and mortar store. So she was pretty entrepreneurial already. But when she joined me, I could only pay her $2,000 a month because I hadn't raised money yet and I wasn't taking a salary. So then I could pay her a little bit. And I would say year 2, I think probably around midpoint, I could take a little salary. So, it was sort of like this thing like, oh my God, it was great. And we went from 10 million to 20 million.
I want to bring something up that you just said that I think is so important, because you're talking about having a business that is 10 million, 20 million a year in revenue. And you're also talking about not taking a salary. And I think it's really important to share that and to say that, especially to other entrepreneurs, because it doesn't matter how big or small your business is. When you're starting, oftentimes you do have to pay other people before you pay yourself. And when you don't, your business, it just isn't going to grow the way that you want it to.
That's right. I had to have people that, look, I wasn't paying them much, but they also, Rati had stock from the beginning. So, you're getting them to bet on the come, and it could have gone the other way, but I couldn't have done anything by myself. If I just couldn't have done it. So I did have to put myself last, and that was the right decision. And of course I had a bigger equity than other people. I tried to be really fair though, but I did have more equity, and that's just the way it is. It wasn't ideal because when I started the company, I only had 2 years of cash. So now I'm a year and a half into it, and it was feeling a little tight.
When do you think the business really changed and shifted? Obviously you were doing big numbers and revenue from the start, but there also wasn't this social media piece when you started. I don't think I knew about the RealReal probably until much later. I'm in Chicago. I'm in the Midwest. When was this like shift? Like, oh my God, we have something really huge.
Well, it kept doubling. So it went like 10 to 20 to 50 to 100 to 250. We're talking millions to 500 million. And I would say when it hit 500 million, which was about probably 15, 16, it was heading toward that. 2017, I think, is when it happened. That's when it couldn't be denied. And the RealReal started winning on the coast some big, important fashion awards. And I was voted someone who was changing the world of fashion by Business of Fashion, one of the top 500 people in the world. We won most original, whatever. I don't know. We just kept winning awards. Even WWD was recognizing us. I think that was 2017, where we were on the stage with Karl Lagerfeld, and Chanel always tried to kill the business. But, it was sort of like you couldn't deny us then. And I would say once New York switched on, so we had the coast, then things just naturally start on the coast. The people are more comfortable with
especially
change.
In this category.
Well, especially because it's, fashion,
yes.
Right? So it's pretty high fashion, more on New York than the West Coast, but the West Coast is still really, really important. And I would say that Chicago turned on around then. I don't know when you found it, but it was probably 2016, 2017. Texas was always late. We kept trying to put people in key cities in Texas, and that didn't work. But the other thing is we had a relationship with Neiman Marcus and Saks, where they were early on. I would say that was 2014, 15. My dates may be a little off, but not too far off. And the goal was they were going to promote the RealReal to their base. And then their customers had an option to be paid in their gift cards, and their gift cards were worth more than cash. So they would actually give them a 10% bonus. And the average consignor at that time was probably getting about $1,000 a year. So you know, and let's say you got paid $2,000, you could have, it'd be worth $2,200 in gift cards at Neiman's. So we kicked off that program, which did sort of move the company to another level. And this is obviously when Neiman's was relevant. They haven't been relevant for a while, but they were still relevant then. Chanel made them in the program. So we couldn't pick up Chanel, and we're just like, well, then we can't do that. But
how long though did you have that partnership? And I ask because
it was only 9 months,
but it had a very big impact on your business.
It brought awareness to key people. Yes.
So
especially in areas where we had no awareness.
So it's interesting because I talk a lot about the importance of partnerships and how strategic partnerships, even if they're not necessarily bringing money to your bottom line, can ultimately bring money to your bottom line through the awareness that they generate. And, you know, that's my first company had a relationship with Target in the same exact way. I mean, I didn't even have a product, but we were doing events in stores, and then the masses were aware of my first company, Bump Club. And, you know, I was just on a call this morning with my mentorship, and we were talking all about partnerships. And I was saying to them, you have to think outside the box and how to leverage other players in your niche to share about your business. And that's what you did.
Oh, and honestly, I'm all about partnerships. We were trying, once we hit $500,000, I really started making my trips to Paris to meet with the top brands, to talk to their management. I mean, to be honest, they were always interested in the RealReal, but they really would prefer the company never existed, you know, because it's it's still a big deal. It's a big deal. And they felt like their brands were being discounted. And who are we to sell it? Like we had every right to sell it.
Just like every consumer has every right to sell their own products the way that they want, like if they are done with it, right?
Right. But you can understand on their perspective, they thought we were ruining their brand. But I'm like, no, we're not ruining the brand. The secondary market supports the primary market.
Don't you feel like you have created more demand for their brands?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It does. Look, when we were still sort of only in the West Coast, people would say, look, I'm shopping now. What's the resale value? This is before we had an app. What's the resale value of this item? And we'd say, well, it's not really holding. And they're like, okay. And it literally would influence the brands people bought. So having a strong resale market does support the primary market. And by the way, the watch market has known that forever. The men's watch market has always been that way.
I have found amazing designers just from looking on your app that I would never see in store, because the in-store experience is just so different now, and you don't get as much of a variety as you once did. And also, I live in the suburbs. I'm not in the city. So there's so many different factors that play into that. Like, I think, the RealReal really revolutionized luxury shopping.
Oh my gosh, that's what Tommy Hilfiger said on my book. That's something like that. Yes. Yes, we didn't set out to do that, but we did.
Before we talk about your book, I want to talk about the fact you stepped down in 2022.
Yes.
And I would love for you to share what led to that decision.
Well, let's just put it this way. It's all in the book. I don't want to give too much. Here's what happened. And I'm going to go backwards before I go address it. So all of my early investors were venture capitalists, except for two. I had two PE guys on my board. One was a guy named Mike Human. But everyone, once we went public, got off the board. I had to replace board members to sell their stock, which makes sense. You don't want to be bound by insider information. Even when you get off a public company board, you still have a period of time, which is usually 6 months before you can transact, where they feel like you're not part of knowing what the next quarter's report is going to be. So you have to be really careful about when you sell your stock. So my original founding investors got off the board. I replaced and recommended a lot of board members. I made a lot of mistakes on recommending those board members. I think it was more understanding there was a huge value disconnect. The one guy who didn't get off the board and didn't sell his stock was underwater during COVID and is probably still underwater unless he wrote it off. He had a small fund, and I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that he was out to get me because he wanted to run the company. He thought he could run it better, but I don't know that for sure because it was all done behind my back. But the board fired me and the rationale is I didn't hit my numbers during COVID.
And so what happened after that? What did you do?
And then they hired someone who had worked for Karen Katz, who was on the board at Neiman Marcus. So they hired someone who was unemployed at the time, who had never been a CEO before. And I had never run a company of that size before. And that person then subsequently got fired later. And Rotzi's now the CEO, but she went through a lot. So what happened to me personally, it was pretty traumatic. I mean,
well, I'm asking you too, because I think it's really important here that we talk about the things that aren't, it's so easy to talk about the good, right? We all do. And you and I had this conversation before we even hopped on today. I shared my story with you and I said, oh, and it was terrible. And you were like, well, I would imagine it was terrible. And you and I both know that those terrible stories exist in the world of entrepreneurship, but a lot of people don't talk about them. And I really
my book, I get very honest in the book. Honestly, it happens a lot to women too, a lot to women.
I just appreciate your honesty.
Well, I don't know how else to be. I mean, it happened. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was to actually talk about the good things and the bad things of being an entrepreneur and the mistakes I made. One of the mistakes I made, first of all, I did during the board meeting, I did really target this guy because he came after me with all this. And I basically accused him of lying in a big way. And then the other new members of the board, which were primarily women, said, you can't talk to him that way. I'm like, yeah, I can when he's lying. So, but the board members I recommended were hierarchical in their thinking. They had never seen a high growth company before. They'd never been with a tech startup before. They didn't understand the dynamics of a founder-led company. And their values were like, we know more than you know. So they had a lot of hubris coming in. So when you look at that group, I recommended them because they had sector expertise, but that was all they had. They never understood. They'd never been in a situation where you have high growth tech business, when you've actually started with nothing and then created a multi-billion-dollar business. So even in the book, I say, maybe it was time for me to go. I was really tired. Maybe it was, but then we could have had a conversation about it instead of making up some crazy thing like you didn't hit your numbers during COVID and bringing in a person who clearly wasn't doing the job because was fired within 2 years. So you look at it and it was just underhanded, nasty, and it didn't have to be that way. And it's painful because, you put all your, that.
Yes.
You create something, yes. You wake up, you do it, you know exactly. And the business, and I'm sure your business sounds even more, every new business, when you're doing something that hasn't been done before, has quirks and really different things about it. And if you break that and you try to do things that it'll break, the business can break. So you need original thinkers when you start a business. But anyway, so yes, and it was unfortunate that it happened the way it did. I say in my book, I didn't help myself because when you give away your power, and then by then I had no respect for any of them on the board. And I knew I was sort of cooked, but to make it worse, I had a new CFO who I really liked. And he kept saying to me before this whole thing happened, something's up. This is weird. These people are doing something against you because they're coming to me. Something's really bad. So I'm not normally, aware. Well, I didn't know him that well. I thought, what if he's paranoid? And he turned out to be astute. It's not something I think about, like watching my back for some political thing.
Right. Well, right. Because you're a good person. And so you want to believe the best in people, I'm guessing.
No, it's just when you're running the business and your head's down and you're like working flat out and you've just maneuvered through a crisis that was so bad for the company because we weren't a self-posting site, so we couldn't pick up product and it was so bad. We had to negotiate with local governments all the time for the shutdown. And it was just intense on all levels. And you're just coming out of that. And you're thinking, now we can start building again. And then to have someone conniving behind you. I mean, I barely had time to sleep, let alone watch my back. But that, I actually think that is a horrible way to run any business or let anyone go. And I think it's disrespectful. And honestly, and I fired a lot of people in my time, and I've always tried to be respectful as one can be when you do that. But to have this just like slam me. So I'm sure he ran a campaign and then I didn't help myself. This is the other thing. I don't know if I think you do work with a lot of women.
I do.
In case people haven't noticed, men and women don't like it when women get angry. Older women don't like it when, especially if you're very traditional, you don't like it when women stand up and get angry, and men really don't know what to do with it. And I lost it. So I gave away my power.
It was your baby. You know what I mean? And I think people ask me all the time, I know it didn't turn out the way you necessarily wanted it to, but do you have regrets? Would you change things? And my answer to that is always, I took it as far as I could take it and then I left and I'm okay with that. I sat Shiva now and I've moved on and it set me up for what was next. Right. So do you have any regrets about the way that this went down?
Oh, I do. But I mean, I can't change it.
Right.
So I think the best thing, you never know how long you're going to live on the planet. And so to carry that too much forward isn't really healthy. And I've got a lot going on that's very positive. So I would say I learned some hard lessons. And I think it's good that you can still learn lessons. I wish I wouldn't have learned that one. I'm glad the company is being now run by someone who knows what they're doing and is really into the business and dedicated in the business, because that means has a chance. The other person was not there to run the business. Let's just put it that way. It didn't appear to be. I don't know for a fact. Didn't appear to be because they had no prior experience that would lead them to get that job, except the board member knew them. And so I feel like that's good. I'm proud I created it. I'm really proud of it. It's not only good for people's pocketbook, it's good for the planet. I'm glad there are other people thinking about wearing Resale. So I feel really good about that chapter of my life. It didn't have the ending I wanted, but you know what? Everything else, even the bad days, were pretty remarkable because we knew we were building something special. So if you just look at the whole thing, that final step, which was really painful and disgraceful, I think, on the part of the board, is such a small sliver of the whole story.
I commend you for having that attitude. And I think that anyone who's listening should be taking a lot from those comments, really and truly, because I think it's very hard to walk away from a situation like that and have the attitude that you have. And so bravo to you, really.
Well, I mean, I didn't have it the first 6 months.
Of course. Yes. But I'm saying even now,
of course.
It is easy to hold on to things like that. And I think, like you just said, there's a lot positive. You left. After you left, you started another company. Let's talk about Ahara for a minute, because
I did.
I mean, it's really? I mean, you didn't take a minute? Did you take a minute?
Time.
Okay.
I don't know. There's a thing that happens when you're over 60. You feel like you're running out of time. And, I feel like you just don't know. 60 is sort of one of those things. Like if you're lucky and you just look around you and you're like, how many vibrant 90-year-olds do you know? There's always an exception. But time moves so fast. So, yes, I started a nutrition company called Ahara that's based on personalized nutrition. It works off an algorithm, so consumers answer questions, and then it gives you your optimal foods, the key nutrients that may not be in your diet that you need to bring in. It maps to recipes, which has those key nutrients in it. And it's a great, solid thing, because every time I studied longevity, and also I've had, and my father didn't know how to eat and ended up dying from complications from obesity after he had a heart attack. He got obese after his heart attack, which is it's like the opposite thing, you should do. He just didn't take care of himself. And so when you look at it, it's what's the biggest deterrent of your health? It's really what you eat matters. Exercise matters, community matters, spirituality matters, but food, if you eat junk food, you are going to have a short, bad life. It creates all kinds of complications. And if you learn how to balance and get in your right nutrients, it does change your life. It makes you healthier. And I wasn't even thinking in terms of nutrients. So I worked with a doctor who worked with some of the top nutrition minds in the world. So it does focus on key nutrients that you may be missing from your diet.
Are you going to ever retire?
I don't even, what does that mean? No, but you said you focus on helping entrepreneurs, and that's my next phase. I do it anyway. So now I'm asking the people, and it's mostly women. Now I'm asking them to sign up and get on my podcast, because then we can share the information with everyone, not just one person. And I've got a couple other people that I'm working with. So I really think that's my mission now, is just to help other people navigate and give them advice. Now, obviously, you don't have to take it, but
you are a wealth of knowledge. You started a multi-billion-dollar technology company that is used by millions of people all around the world. And then you started another app after. We didn't even scratch the surface with Ahara. It's like we're going to have a whole other episode about Ahara.
It's pretty sophisticated. I think the challenge, and it's been hard, I think the challenge is a lot of people are getting their health information from TikTok.
Oh my God. A lot of people are getting a lot of bad information on TikTok.
Actually, and now because I get all these medical journals and all the thing, and that's actually the doctor's biggest threat, they said, is TikTok information for people's health. And I would say the same thing with nutrition. So people think they know what's good for them. And in fact, they may, but there's a good chance they don't. Even simple things for me personally, omega-3s are really important for everybody. I've always had a hard time eating fatty fish like salmon. I love it, but it makes me sick. And I did go ahead and do some genetic testing. It turns out I don't absorb that omega-3s, which has all kinds of negative consequences. So now I take an over supplement and measure and get it. You can actually do a blood test and get that measured. And so I changed my supplementation, and also I wasn't eating enough seeds. Seeds and beans are very important, but in me, I was not eating enough seeds in my diet. So I did make some changes. And I think the other thing is, by leaving the RealReal, it takes a lot out of you, as you know, to start your business. And we kept doubling. And then COVID had its own pressures. So I needed to also get my own nutrition back and my own exercise plan back, which was great because, I lost some weight and I feel better. And I'm just more consistent on how I can handle my day to day now, which I don't want to say I wasn't taking care of myself, because I always exercise to get rid of the stress. But now I'm sleeping more. It's hard to do all those things when you're
running a business.
To sleep right, to eat right, and traveling. I was traveling all the time. So
your book is coming out in June. It's called Time to Get Real: How I Built a $1 Billion Business That Rocked the Fashion Industry. And how are you using this book to segue into this new chapter of yours to help entrepreneurs? Because that was the first thing you brought up when we got on our call today.
I know. First of all, I wrote it, and I wrote it in the way I want to get information. So I hate the books that are like, here are the 5 things you need to do, because it's like, there's never 5 things. So I wrote it and wove in my lessons I learned sort of as you go along. And there's a lot of lessons in there, but they're not going to knock you over the head. And, I'll give you a simple one, which I wrote about. I don't call it a lesson, but it's really important. And I'm sure you run into this too when you talk to people. People think their ideas are precious, and their ideas may be precious, but without putting them into the world and without actually making them concrete and actually bringing them up, they're not really, everyone's got an idea. Mm-hmm. But then making it happen is where everything makes a difference. So after I created the RealReal, I would say every week someone came up, oh, I had that idea. And I'm like, okay. but you didn't do it. And believe me, if you have that idea and it's a big idea, someone else has that idea. Then it comes down who executes the best, and that creates a strategic difference. So all these, especially Silicon Valley entrepreneurs are all like, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm like, okay, so what? So what?
Until you put it out into the world, it means nothing.
It means nothing. I'm glad you always have to start with a dream, and you have to start with an idea. But, I would say whatever's holding people back to take that next step, they should just go for it. I know I held myself back for years out of fear of failure.
It's so funny because I would say 95% of the women who come on this podcast, and I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked them at the end in a couple of minutes. But, when I say like, what's one thing that, you would tell entrepreneurs who are just getting started, and the number one thing is just get started. I mean, it's like,
exactly,
and I always tell people too, like, if you have an idea, set up an Instagram account, set up a social media handle, and just start talking to the people who you want to talk to, and like put it out into the world, and it will materialize from there. But if you don't put it out there, it means shit.
That's
like,
right.
Really.
No, it does. That's right. It's the old Nike thing, just do it.
Yeah.
Just get on with it. And the same thing, when we started out, we were going to do our first brick and mortar store test. And I was in New York, and I kept thinking, and now there's like over 17 stores, I think, or something. But I kept thinking, we need to bring this brand to life because people don't understand the quality of the merchandise. You don't want to go full in on a brick and mortar store till you understand it. So I mentioned that I had this conference call with Rati, who was my right-hand person anyway. I'm like, I think it's time. I really think we need to pull together a team and just get a pop-up in New York for Christmas. Let's just see what we can do. Now it's the end of September, and we opened that pop-up store, November 1st.
Oh my God.
So, and that's what entrepreneurs do. Like,
when was that?
That was, oh my gosh, I'm going to say 2017. I may be off, but I think it was.
And I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, and especially now that you have 17 locations, that revolutionized the brand as well, just as much as the partnership with Neiman Marcus.
Absolutely. It changed everything. We didn't know it at the time, but you can measure it. This is the other cool thing. When you have a data-driven company, you can measure the uplift. Did the average order go up? Did it change what happened online? Absolutely. But one of the things we didn't realize, which was pretty dumb in retrospect, but that's why you test, right? Before you commit. We didn't realize people were going to be wheeling in consignment for the site. And then we didn't even have a space in that pop-up. It never occurred to us. So then when we built the store on Worcester in Soho, the very first store, we had a whole bottom level where a third of it was dedicated to the consignment office. And now there's even more. But, that's why you test, right? And you just don't go out and especially with that was a capital expenditure.
And even though you guys were a tech company, and I know we're going a little backwards in our conversation right now, but even though you guys were a tech company, I always tell people want to buy from people. And there is still this very large component of an exchange where people do want to touch and feel, and they want to see an experience. And oftentimes when you have those pop-ups and you leverage real life events, because not everyone has a retail location, it does put your business on the map in a bigger way.
In a much bigger way. People understood the brand for the first time. And to the board's credit, this was the early board, not the later board, but the early board. They said, we didn't get it. And then when they went into the store and if they couldn't make the pop-up, we got a store out in about another 4. I think it ended up being that took longer because no one wanted to give us permanent space because they considered us a pawn shop. They didn't like having a resale store in their neighborhood. But anyway, it took a little longer to get a permanent space. But when they walked in, they were like, I get it. This is remarkable. And that was the next big accelerant for the brand, without a doubt.
So, Julie, I know that your book is jam-packed and filled with a ton of advice and information. But what are the 3 things that you would tell an entrepreneur who's just getting started, other than just getting started, because we talked about that. So other than just getting started.
All right. So I would say come in with great conviction of your idea and then iterate. Don't believe your own press. Don't stick on something that's not working. Really get feedback and figure out, maybe you're mostly right, maybe you're not right at all, but really look for early signs and make sure that before you expand, and you have to be brutally honest. So don't let your ego get in the way of the business. And then the other thing is, people that you hire matter a lot. And I would say beyond skills, make sure your values are aligned. I did it internally in my company and I didn't do it on the board. And so value alignment and skill alignment are both critical. And then also, there was a great vibe in the company where everyone was on a mission and people worked really hard, but A, they were rewarded for it, and B, it was kind of amazing. It was a lot of fun. And when you can create that environment, then you can also see people that work for you do things that they didn't even think was possible.
Julie Wainwright, founder of the RealReal and Ahara, thank you so much for being here. I feel like we really did just scratch the surface. I feel like I could talk to you for a million more hours. You have so much insight and knowledge and wisdom, and I so appreciate you sharing that with our community today. We will be plugging your book in the show notes, and we will let everyone know where to find you as well. So thank you so much for being here.
And thank you for having this platform for women entrepreneurs. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie built an incredible empire, and you can too. Don't forget to get on the list to receive our updated newsletter when it relaunches later this summer. Inside will be tips, strategies, case studies, and so much more. Plus, you'll never miss another Dear FoundHer event or workshop again. Before we go today, I want to share my top takeaway from today's conversation. There were so many, but as I said at the top of the show, I loved how Julie added in real life brand experiences to the RealReal. And not only that, but how meeting her customers where they were with what they wanted to experience really helped her to grow the brand. There is nothing better than connecting in real life. Truly, there isn't. If you're able to do this with your own target customers. And I love how Julie worked this into her brand's ethos despite being a tech company. So I want to ask you, how can you meet and connect with your target community, if not live and in the flesh, but virtually? Please think about this, because this can be a make or break for taking your business to the next level. If you liked today's conversation, I would love it if you scroll to the bottom of our podcast page on Apple or Spotify and left a 5-star rating or a review. This is how other people find us and our amazing guests. Don't forget to check out Julie's book, Time to Get Real, How I Built a $1 billion Business That Rocked the Fashion Industry, which is out this week. I know you have a million things that you could be doing, so thank you for spending some of your time today with me. I appreciate you listening and being here, because your support is everything. Stay tuned for an amazing conversation coming your way next week. I promise you're not going to want to miss it. I'll see you then.